And it's good afternoon, I suppose, in Australia now. So he taught in English literature at the University of Dhaka, and then he went and did his PhD at Monash and joined the Monash Faculty of Education there. He has published widely in the areas of TESOL and ELT, culture, pedagogy, English teacher education, international education, social justice, and identity. Dr. Rakib is very well known as an international speaker at conferences, and I'd like to invite him to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Arifa. I just wanted to make sure everyone can hear me all right.
I think so.
All right, thank you. Good morning, or should I say good afternoon from Melbourne. It's 2:11 in the afternoon here on a Friday. Looking forward to the first weekend after a year and a half without masks. We are going maskless from tomorrow, so that's certainly very, very exciting. And with Mushfiq Bhai and Amin Bhai and others in Melbourne, I think we are all excited. And I'll go to the shopping mall just for the fun of going out without a mask and see how it feels. Probably I'll feel a bit naked without any face covering, but we'll see how it goes. Anyway, I'm very happy to present here at the EPIB2, the second conference on English pronunciation in Bangladesh. Particular thanks to Amin Bhai for inviting me, and I know he's at the core of planning and organizing and convening this event. Absolutely. This is, of course, not my first association or collaboration with Amin Bhai, and I'll refer to one of research works that we've been engaged in the last couple of years. But I actually had made a script to read out for this colloquium, and listening to my fellow panelists, I'm tempted to throw it out and simply respond to some of the issues picked up by others because they were so interesting and diverse, and in fact, in many ways, a lot more interesting than what I was prepared to say in this script. So I will go a bit extempore in way of responding to other members in the panel, but also read out from certain parts of the script. I think for me, the most interesting thing being the last speaker is that I have the knowledge of how other people, my colleagues in the colloquium, think about different aspects of pronunciation, English pronunciation in general, in society, in the classroom, in policies, and how that should affect our behavior and comparing languages. So that's my advantage coming in last. But also the diversity. So we have engineers, we have first or second generation immigrants in English-speaking countries. We have academics like Haidar Bhai is here, also a fellow Monash PhD student. We have academics, we have English teachers, and we have those who are not directly related to academia. We have Bodrul Bhai, who's a journalist that I'm very fond of. So the multidisciplinary composition of this panel makes it very interesting for me to look at how non-academics look at pronunciation and the teaching of pronunciation and the importance of pronunciation and how much value we should attach to accuracy and the question of intelligibility and all of that. Something that I'm shielded of because of the nature of my work. We work within an academic environment, whether it's research or supervision or publication or conferences, it's all talking to other educators. So we never really have this discussion, having talks on the complexities of teaching pronunciation or the importance of pronunciation from people from other professions, which is the opportunity that I've got by being on this panel. So I am appreciative of all the views. And so here are some of mine. I'd just like to start with, just a few references to some of the things that I picked up from my colleagues earlier in the presentation. So Professor Amin Rahman, who's not here anymore, talked about pronunciation, certain words like he was talking about vote as opposed to vote, V-O-T-E, and also bhutto and bhutto, foreigners or English speakers pronouncing bhutto as bhutto, and also card as opposed to card. So, beer card as opposed to card. which is also something that Mr. Bodrul Hasan mentioned. So that is one type of mispronunciation where there is no equivalent, in the native language of the speaker to approximate the pronunciation of something like bhot. Because when we say bhot, we are mispronouncing because we really don't have V in Bangla. So that is different from the second set of mispronunciation, which is, and again, that is from Mr. Bodrul Hasan's example, pleasure instead of pleasure, right? Which are systematic errors. And then there is the third type that Haidar Bhai, Professor Zulfikar Haidar mentioned, imagine instead of imagine, or Pixar instead of picture, which is not because of not getting an approximate or equivalent phonetic equivalent in the native language of the speaker. So there are three different types of mispronunciations. Some are systematic, some are not systematic. Some are happening because there is no equivalent of that phoneme in the speaker's native language. For example, there is no P in Arabic and such and such. We don't have V in Bangla. We have Pho. We don't have Vo. We don't have that. And flower is full. It's not full because we actually don't have F in Bangla. There is no F in Bangla. It's not full. Sorry, it's not full. F-O-O-L, boca. It is actually full, flower. So there is that kind of problem, but there is also mispronunciation. So just to summarize the nature of mispronunciation, I've given examples of only three, might indicate not just a deliberate mistake or something out of control of the speaker in making a mistake, but something that is systematic. It might not have anything to do with the education that we receive. Then again, there is the question of standard pronunciation, and Mr. Bodrul Hasan was talking about US English and UK English, and I could feel that he had a preference for UK English. Just like me, if I had to choose, I'd probably choose UK English because it sounds cool. And he was giving examples of, things like American English, American. So, them talking about using double negatives, for example, or ain't or something. Now, academically speaking, as far as my research is concerned, I'm a critical ethnographer. So I'm actually not a linguist. So I don't really have the knowledge of the mechanics of how language works as much as Amin Bhai, for example, or I'm sure Bodrul Bhai as well, or even Mushfiq Bhai, and certainly Kazi Haq Bhai. The way they spoke about language and the mechanics of language, I actually don't have that knowledge. But the fact that I'm a critical ethnographer means that instead of looking at the mechanics of language, such as syntax and morphology and phonology and all of those things that I can't even think about right now, instead of looking at the structural aspects, the mechanical aspects of language, I'm more interested in the power and agency and the discursive positions that standardized varieties of English can impose upon the speaker when they make a preference or a comparison between UK and US English or native, non-native, that kind of distinction. So my epistemological position makes me look at power structures and question the value of adherence to one or the other standard variety. So it's almost like, you have to sound like, a British speaker or an American speaker, but nothing in between. Because if it is nothing in between, then you're not right. So pedagogically speaking, in the classroom, teachers have this tendency of following one or the other standard and saying, until and unless you can say pleasure, you're not doing it right. Now, Americans they would say, I ain't gonna do nothing. Double negative, ain't, doesn't make sense, etc. For me, as Dr. Mushfiq Rahman mentioned, intelligibility is more important In today's scenario, we're talking about Zoom, it's wonderful technology bringing all of us together from so many countries together across time and space, all this geography. As long as we understand each other, I agree with Mr. Kazi Hawk, pronunciation, or instead I would say standardized pronunciation that aligns with specific varieties is probably not so important after all. And that is what Mr. Kazi Hawk was talking about when he says, English is a ridiculous language. I absolutely agree. Then again, Bangla is also a ridiculous language, not only to non-Bengali people, but to ourselves as well. Because how many of us know how to pronounce, and I'm talking about pronunciation only, forget about Shamash and Karok and all those useless grammatical rules that we learned at school that we never really used. How many of us can pronounce the difference between do shunno ro and do shunno ro, the difference between boro and ashar her? It's not ashar, it's ashar her. Do we need it? Do we understand each other? Now, I've been told by Amin Bhai that Mr. Kazi Hawk is a great fan of Rabindra Sangit. If that is the case, it would probably matter to him, but it probably wouldn't matter to us. Now, in day-to-day communication or teaching and learning in the classroom, I would again say we will go back to intelligibility rather than standardized versions of pronunciation. Now, that is not to say pronunciation doesn't matter. Pronunciation is very, very important. The problem is when we try to align it with standardized varieties of pronunciation and say you have to be either British or American, but not in between. You cannot have a Bangladeshi accent of English because that is not recognized. That is when we have a problem. And this is where, just to finish off I'm just skipping over everything because I really don't need this. This is where the notion of intelligibility and EIL, English as an international language, comes in. The notion of EIL, which I've written about, which is quite common among those who are doing graduate studies in English or TESOL or English education, EIL, or some would say WE, World Englishes, which is a bit different from ELF, which is English as a lingua franca, is the notion that English is an international language in the sense that there are no native speakers of English anymore. So using my critical ethnographic perspective, when I look at power structures and the notion of ownership and the notion of dominant discourses, subjugated discourses, standardization, acceptance, equity, social justice, empowerment, for me, intelligibility is far more important than any kind of adherence to any standardized variety of English. So once again, yes, pronunciation is important, but it doesn't have to sound like one of the standard varieties of English. So I'll just read out the last part of my written script, which I've completely bypassed, because that's like a summary of and hope and optimism that I have, not only for the studies that are that will be showcased rest of the day today as part of the EPIB2, but also my hope as an academic and as a researcher. And once again, I acknowledge the great diversity of views that I really enjoyed and felt that really important they are from my fellow colloquium speakers. So thank you very much. Research highlights the need for educational institutes and the government, but also parents and researchers to get involved in researching optimized teaching and learning of English language speaking for all learners. The increasing importance of English in the global context, as well as in Bangladesh, will only further increase in the decades to come, with the foreign language of choice, which in Bangladesh happens to be English, and of course, why not? There is therefore greater need for us to find ways in which this neglected area of language education, speaking and pronunciation, can feature more prominently and conspicuously in both our teaching and in research. The pedagogical implications. Today's presentations are hoped. Today's presentations are hoped to pique our interest as educators and learners of English, and enhance the overall quality of ELT in Bangladesh. And that is only possible when academics and teachers join forces with non-academics and parents and immigrants living in English-speaking countries, and those who don't have any teaching experience, and journalists and media personalities and everyone else come together in a forum such as like this, which I think is what makes this such an exciting event. So thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Dr. Rakib Chaudhry. That was extremely enlightening. And the fact that you brought up this intelligibility factor is really the essence of pronunciation, particularly when the whole world today has more non-native speakers than speakers, and there's more and more communication between non-natives and non-natives.